The evening sun cast long shadows across the pristine sidewalks of Manhattan's Upper East Side as Dr. Alexandra Chen approached La Maison d'Or, one of the city's most prestigious Michelin-starred restaurants. Her designer heels clicked against the pavement, each step emanating the confidence that had helped her build a billion-dollar biotechnology empire from scratch. At 42, Alexandra had grown accustomed to being the only woman of color in rooms full of powerful executives. But tonight wasn't about business meetings or corporate takeovers, it was meant to be a celebration. Her company had just developed a breakthrough cancer treatment, potentially saving millions of lives. The restaurant's elegant facade loomed before her, its golden lettering gleaming in the fading daylight. Alexandra had made a reservation weeks in advance, specifically requesting the chef's table for herself and her team of researchers. As she approached the entrance, the doorman's welcoming smile suddenly faltered. "Good evening," Alexandra said warmly, used to putting others at ease despite their initial reactions to her presence. "I have a reservation for 6 under Dr. Chen." The doorman's eyes darted nervously to the maitre d', who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. "Madam, I'm afraid there seems to be a situation with your reservation," the maitre d' said, his French accent thick with poorly concealed disdain. Alexandra maintained her composure, though she knew exactly what was happening. She'd faced similar situations before, even after her success had landed her on the cover of Forbes. "I confirmed the reservation this morning," she replied calmly, pulling out her phone to show the email. The maitre d' barely glanced at the screen. "Ah, yes, but you see, the chef's table is reserved for our most distinguished guests. Perhaps I could recommend another establishment more suitable for your gathering?" A few curious diners peered through the windows, and Alexandra felt the familiar weight of unwanted attention. But years of dealing with prejudice had taught her to transform discomfort into opportunity. She smiled, taking out her business card. "I understand. Please give this to your owner, Mr. Pierre Dubois. I'm sure he'd be interested to know that his establishment is turning away the CEO of Chentech Pharmaceuticals." The maitre d's expression remained impassive, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Mr. Dubois is unavailable at present. Again, I must insist." "That's fine," Alexandra interrupted smoothly. "I'll wait." She took a seat on one of the elegant benches outside, her posture relaxed but commanding. She watched as the maitre d' hurried inside, phone in hand. Her own phone buzzed, her team was running late due to traffic. "Perfect timing," she texted back. "Take your time." Alexandra used the moment to make a few calls, her mind already formulating a plan that would transform this humiliating experience into something meaningful. Inside, she could see the staff huddled in conversation, throwing worried glances her way. The restaurant's reputation for exclusivity was legendary, but so was its history of selective service. Alexandra had done her research before making the reservation. There were whispered stories of similar incidents, but no one had ever challenged them publicly. 20 minutes passed before a well-dressed man in his 60s emerged, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. "Dr. Chen," he said, extending his hand. "I am Pierre Dubois. There seems to be a misunderstanding." Alexandra stood, her smile unwavering. "No misunderstanding, Mr. Dubois. Your staff made the situation quite clear. I'm actually glad this happened, it's made my decision much easier." "Decision?" Dubois asked, a note of apprehension in his voice. "Yes. You see, I've been looking to diversify my investment portfolio. The restaurant industry has always intrigued me, particularly establishments with potential for improvement." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Your restaurant has been struggling financially for the past 2 years. The pandemic hit you hard, and your outdated business model isn't helping." Dubois's confident facade cracked slightly. "How did you?" "I make it my business to know things, Mr. Dubois. Just like I know your investors are getting nervous. They're looking to sell their shares, worried about the restaurant's declining reputation and mounting debts. The street had grown quieter, the setting sun painting the scene in dramatic shades of orange and purple. Alexandra could see her team approaching in the distance, but she maintained eye contact with Dubois. "I'm prepared to make you an offer," she continued. "One that would allow you to retire comfortably while ensuring La Maison d'Or's legacy continues, under new management, of course." Dubois's face flushed. "This is preposterous. You cannot simply." "I can and I will," Alexandra replied firmly. "Your choice is simple: sell to me now, or watch as I buy out your investors one by one. Either way, change is coming to La Maison d'Or." As her team finally arrived, Alexandra handed Dubois another card, this time, her lawyer's. "Think it over. You have until tomorrow afternoon." She turned to her confused but supportive team members. "Change of plans, everyone. I know a wonderful family-owned restaurant a few blocks away. The food is excellent, and more importantly, they understand the value of treating all their guests with respect." As they walked away, Alexandra felt a mix of emotions, frustration at having to deal with such discrimination in 2025, but also determination to create meaningful change. This wasn't just about buying a restaurant, it was about transforming an institution and setting a new standard for inclusivity in fine dining. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her lawyer. The initial research into La Maison d'Or's financials had been completed. Everything was proceeding exactly as Alexandra had anticipated. By this time tomorrow, she would own one of New York's most prestigious restaurants, and its transformation would send ripples through the entire industry. Looking back at the restaurant's gleaming facade, Alexandra smiled. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't just success, it was using that success to open doors for others who might come after you. The real work was about to begin, and she was ready for it. The following morning, Alexandra sat in her penthouse office overlooking Central Park, reviewing the detailed financial reports of La Maison d'Or. Her assistant had just brought in her third cup of green tea when her phone buzzed, Pierre Dubois's name flashing on the screen. "Dr. Chen speaking," she answered, her voice steady despite the anticipation building in her chest. "This is Pierre Dubois. I've considered your proposal." His voice sounded tired, likely from a sleepless night. "Perhaps we could meet to discuss terms?" Alexandra checked her watch, 9:15 a.m. She'd expected this call, though it came earlier than anticipated. "I can clear my schedule for lunch. Shall we say noon?" "Your restaurant, of course." A pause. Yes, that would be acceptable." "Excellent. And Pierre? Have your lawyer present. It'll make things smoother." She ended the call and turned to her window, watching the morning joggers in Central Park below. The next few hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Her legal team arrived with stacks of documents, and her financial advisors presented various valuation scenarios. Alexandra had spent months preparing for this opportunity, long before last night's incident. She'd studied the restaurant industry extensively, particularly the transformation of traditional establishments in the modern era. At precisely noon, Alexandra walked through the doors of La Maison d'Or again. This time, the maitre d' practically tripped over himself to greet her. The restaurant was empty, Dubois had cleared it for their meeting. Pierre Dubois sat at a corner table, accompanied by an elderly gentleman in an expensive suit, his lawyer, presumably. Alexandra's own legal team followed behind her, carrying sleek briefcases filled with contracts and proposals. "Thank you for meeting with me," Alexandra began, taking her seat. "I trust you've had time to review your situation." Dubois nodded stiffly. "You were correct about our financial challenges. But La Maison d'Or is more than just a business. It's a legacy, a tradition. A tradition of exclusivity that's becoming increasingly costly," Alexandra interrupted gently. "Your monthly losses are mounting. Your staff turnover is high. And your reputation. She paused meaningfully. Well, let's just say that in today's social media age, one viral video of discrimination could end everything you've built. The elderly lawyer cleared his throat. Dr. Chen, if we could discuss numbers? Of course. Alexandra nodded to her team, who distributed detailed proposals to everyone at the table. I'm prepared to offer $12 million for full ownership. This includes assuming all current debts and liabilities. Your staff will be retained, initially, though changes will be necessary. Dubois's face reddened. 12 million? This restaurant has been valued at $18 million, 2 years ago, Alexandra finished. Before the pandemic, before the rise of delivery services, before your best sous chef left to start his own restaurant in Brooklyn. Times change, Pierre. My offer is more than fair. The next 2 hours were a delicate dance of negotiation. Alexandra watched as Dubois struggled with the reality of his situation. His lawyer occasionally whispered in his ear, likely reminding him of the mounting pressures from investors and banks. The Dubois name stays, Pierre said finally, his voice rough with emotion. For 6 months, Alexandra countered. Long enough for a smooth transition. After that, we rebrand completely. More discussion, more negotiations. The lawyers exchanged documents, made adjustments, consulted with their clients. Outside, the afternoon sun cast shifting shadows through the restaurant's elegant windows, playing across the crisp white tablecloths. Finally, just as the staff would normally be preparing for dinner service, the contracts were signed. Pierre Dubois stood, looking somehow smaller than he had the night before. I trust you'll take care of her, he said quietly, gesturing to the restaurant around them. Alexandra stood as well, extending her hand. I'll make her better. Different, but better. Change isn't always comfortable, Pierre, but it's necessary for growth. After Dubois and his lawyer left, Alexandra remained at the table, absorbing the reality of what had just transpired. The restaurant was hers. Looking around, she could already envision the changes needed, not just to the decor or menu, but to the very culture of the place. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Detective Rivera? Yes, I'd like to proceed with those staff interviews we discussed. Yes, all of them, especially from the last 5 years. I want to know every instance of discrimination that was swept under the rug. Her next call was to a prominent restaurant consultant she'd worked with before. James? It's Alexandra. Remember that project we discussed hypothetically? It's happening. Yes, I just bought it. How quickly can you get to New York? As the evening approached, Alexandra gathered the staff, from the executive chef to the dishwashers. Many looked nervous, some defiant, others curious. She stood before them in the main dining room, her presence commanding attention. By now, you've heard that ownership has changed hands, she began. Some of you might be wondering about your jobs. Let me be clear, I'm not here to clean house. I'm here to clean conscience. This restaurant has a history, some of it glorious, some of it shameful. Together, we're going to acknowledge both and build something better. She paused, making eye contact with various staff members, including the maitre d' from the previous night. In the coming weeks, each of you will have a chance to share your experiences, your ideas, and your concerns. Some of you will choose to be part of this transformation. Others will decide it's not for them. Both choices are valid. But understand this, she continued, her voice firm but not unkind, discrimination of any kind ends today. Not just because it's wrong, but because it's bad business. Real excellence doesn't need exclusivity to prove its worth. As she concluded the meeting, Alexandra noticed the youngest dishwasher, a college student, raising her hand tentatively. Yes? Will we still be fine dining? The girl asked, voicing what many were probably wondering. Alexandra smiled. Will be something better. Will be fine dining that remembers its humanity. Starting tomorrow, we begin our transformation. I suggest you all get some rest, it's going to be an interesting journey. As the staff filed out, Alexandra stood in the center of the dining room, surrounded by decades of tradition and privilege. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, transforming not just a restaurant, but mindsets, one meal at a time. The next few weeks at Le Maison d'Or were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Alexandra had converted the private dining room into a temporary office, where she spent hours conducting one-on-one interviews with staff members. The stories she heard ranged from uncomfortable to heartbreaking. They made me change my name tag to Andy instead of Anand, a senior waiter confided, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Said it would make the guests more comfortable. After 15 years of service, this was the first time anyone had asked for his real story. A former hostess, who'd quit 6 months ago, returned specifically to share her experiences. They had an unwritten rule about which tables to seat certain guests at, always by the kitchen or near the back entrance if they weren't the right type. Her voice trembled with anger as she spoke. Alexandra documented everything, building a clear picture of the systemic issues that had plagued the restaurant. But she also discovered unexpected allies among the staff, people who had tried to fight the system from within, who had small acts of rebellion against the discrimination they witnessed. The executive chef, a quiet man named David Wong, proved to be one of them. I've wanted to incorporate more diverse influences into our menu for years, he revealed during their meeting. But tradition was always the excuse to stay safe, stay French, stay exclusive. Alexandra leaned forward, intrigued. Show me, she said simply. The next day, Wong presented a tasting menu that blended classical French techniques with influences from his Chinese heritage and his travels across Asia and South America. The flavors were bold, innovative, yet somehow perfectly aligned with the restaurant's commitment to excellence. This is exactly what we need, Alexandra declared after tasting his creations. Not fusion for the sake of fusion, but evolution. Growth. She paused, savoring the lingering taste of his lemongrass-infused bouillabaisse. How quickly can you train the kitchen staff on a new menu? But not everyone was enthusiastic about the changes. A group of regular customers, learning of the ownership change, began canceling their standing reservations. The maitre d', still adjusting to the new expectations, seemed to take particular pleasure in reporting each cancellation to Alexandra. Another cancellation, madam, he announced one morning, his tone carefully neutral but his eyes gleaming. The Worthingtons. They've been dining here every Thursday for 12 years. Alexandra looked up from her laptop, where she'd been reviewing applications from several promising young chefs eager to join Wong's team. Thank you for letting me know. Please send them a note expressing our gratitude for their past patronage and inviting them to return when we reopen. Include a copy of our new mission statement. The maitre d' hesitated. Reopen? Yes, Alexandra smiled, enjoying his surprise. We're closing for renovations in 2 weeks. Complete overhaul, physical and philosophical. She stood and walked to the windows, where workers were already taking measurements for new fixtures. It's time to bring this space into the present while honoring its past. The news of the temporary closure spread quickly through the restaurant industry. Food blogs buzzed with speculation about what Alexandra Chen, known for disrupting the biotech industry, would do with one of New York's most traditional fine dining establishments. But Alexandra was focused on more than just physical changes. She hired diversity consultants to conduct mandatory training sessions for all staff members. She implemented new hiring practices to ensure opportunities were accessible to talented individuals from all backgrounds. And she worked closely with Wong to develop a menu that would tell a story of tradition meeting innovation. One evening, as the sun set over Manhattan, Alexandra found herself alone in the dining room, surrounded by swatches of fabric and paint samples. The space was already being transformed, the heavy burgundy drapes would soon be replaced with sleek, modern window treatments, letting in more natural light. The ornate gold fixtures would give way to elegant, minimalist designs. Her phone buzzed with a message from her PR team. Several former guests who had been discriminated against over the years had come forward, willing to share their stories. Many expressed surprise and hope at the changes being implemented. "We need to handle this carefully," she typed back. "This isn't about shame or revenge. It's about acknowledgement, growth, and creating something better." As she walked through the kitchen, she noticed one of the line cooks teaching a new hire how to properly julienne vegetables. The new cook was a recent graduate from a community culinary program Alexandra had partnered with, part of her initiative to create pathways for underrepresented talent in the fine dining world. "How's she doing?" Alexandra asked Wong, who was supervising nearby. "Better knife skills than I had at her age," he replied with a proud smile. "And she has ideas, good ones. Been showing me some techniques her grandmother used in Bangladesh." Alexandra nodded, pleased. This was exactly what she'd hoped for, a kitchen where expertise could flow in all directions, where tradition didn't mean stagnation. Later that night, as she reviewed the latest design proposals in her office, she received an unexpected visitor. It was the young dishwasher who had asked about fine dining during the first staff meeting. "Dr. Chen? I hope I'm not interrupting." The girl began hesitantly. "Not at all. Come in, Lisa. What's on your mind?" Lisa twisted her hands nervously. "Some of us, the younger staff, we've been talking. We want to help more, be more involved in the changes. We started a group chat sharing ideas about how to make guests feel more welcome, little things we've noticed." Alexandra put down her papers, giving Lisa her full attention. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, she listened as Lisa shared insights and suggestions that only someone working at ground level would notice. Many were surprisingly practical, from adjusting the lighting in certain areas to creating a more efficient system for accommodating dietary restrictions. "You know," Alexandra said when Lisa finished, "we're going to need a staff liaison for the reopening committee. Someone who can gather input from all levels of the operation and help implement changes. Would you be interested?" Lisa's eyes widened. "Me? But I'm just a—" "You're exactly what we need," Alexandra interrupted gently. "Someone who sees both the big picture and the small details. Someone who cares enough to speak up." As Lisa left the office, practically floating with excitement, Alexandra added another note to her already lengthy to-do list: create employee development program, identify internal talent for advancement. The transformation of Le Maison d'Or was more than just a renovation or a rebranding. It was becoming a revolution in fine dining, a testament to what could happen when tradition met progress, when excellence embraced inclusivity. And they were only just beginning. 3 weeks into the renovation, Le Maison d'Or was barely recognizable. The once formal dining room had been stripped to its bones, revealing beautiful architectural details that had been hidden under decades of outdated decor. Alexandra stood in the center of the controlled chaos, hard hat in place, reviewing progress with her construction team. "The original ceiling medallions are stunning," her lead architect said, pointing upward with her laser pointer. "We've discovered hand-carved details from the 1920s. Once restored, they'll be a perfect blend of history and modernity." Alexandra smiled, watching as workers carefully restored the intricate plasterwork. She'd insisted on preserving these historical elements while modernizing the space. It was a perfect metaphor for her entire vision, honoring the past while boldly stepping into the future. Meanwhile, in a temporary test kitchen set up in a nearby rental space, Chef Wong and his team were experimenting with their new menu. The air was filled with an intoxicating blend of aromas as traditional French techniques merged with global influences. "Try this," Wong said, presenting Alexandra with a small plate. "It's our take on coq au vin, but we're using Chinese red cooking wine instead of traditional French wine, and incorporating star anise and Sichuan peppercorns. The dish was a revelation, familiar yet exciting, complex yet comforting. "This is exactly what we're looking for," Alexandra declared, already imagining the reactions of future guests. But not everything was proceeding smoothly. One morning, Alexandra arrived to find protesters outside the construction site, a small but vocal group of former regular customers and traditionalists from the culinary world. "Save French cuisine," one sign read. "Tradition matters," declared another. Lisa, now confidently settling into her role as staff liaison, approached Alexandra as she surveyed the scene. "They've been here since sunrise. Some of them are food critics and influencers who've been posting negative things about the changes." Alexandra nodded thoughtfully. "Get me a coffee, please." And then set up the camera in the test kitchen. "It's time we showed people exactly what we're doing here." An hour later, Alexandra hosted an impromptu live stream from the test kitchen. Chef Wang demonstrated his new dishes while Alexandra explained their vision. They showed how each innovation respected and built upon classical techniques, rather than replacing them. "Cuisine, like culture, isn't meant to be preserved in amber," Alexandra explained to the camera. "It's meant to grow, to evolve, to be enriched by new perspectives and experiences. We're not erasing tradition, we're helping it thrive in the modern world." The live stream went viral in the culinary community. Support started pouring in from unexpected quarters, renowned chefs from around the world, culinary school professors, and even a few French cooking legends who praised the innovative approach to classical cuisine. The construction continued at a rapid pace. Alexandra had hired a local art curator to source works from emerging artists of diverse backgrounds. The newly designed walls would showcase rotating exhibitions, turning the dining space into a celebration of both culinary and visual arts. One of the most significant changes was to the restaurant's entrance. The imposing doors that had once intimidated so many potential guests were replaced with elegant glass panels that created a welcoming transparency. The host station was redesigned to be more approachable, with comfortable seating nearby for waiting guests. The old layout was designed to make people feel small, Alexandra explained to her design team. "We want people to feel valued from the moment they arrive." In the back of the house, the changes were equally dramatic. The kitchen was completely redesigned with state-of-the-art equipment and improved workflow. More importantly, the staff areas were upgraded significantly, better break rooms, comfortable changing areas, and a new staff dining room where team meals would be served. A restaurant that claims to care about hospitality needs to start with its own people, Alexandra insisted when her financial advisor questioned these expenses. The transformation wasn't just physical. Alexandra had implemented new hiring practices, bringing in talented individuals who might have been overlooked by traditional fine dining establishments. The staff was becoming as diverse as the city itself, each person bringing unique perspectives and skills to their roles. One afternoon, as Alexandra was reviewing the new employee handbook with her HR team, she received an unexpected visit from an elderly woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Thompson. "I tried to dine here in 1963, the woman explained, her voice steady but her eyes glistening. "They turned me away. I was dressed in my finest clothes, but they said they were fully booked, despite all the empty tables I could see through the window. I never tried coming to a place like this again." Alexandra listened intently as Mrs. Thompson shared her story. "Would you do us the honor of being one of our first guests when we reopen?" she asked, and the woman finished speaking. "Your feedback would be invaluable." Mrs. Thompson smiled, touching Alexandra's hand. "I'd like that very much." As the renovation entered its final weeks, excitement built among the staff. The new uniforms arrived, elegant but comfortable, designed with input from the employees who would wear them. The wine cellar was restocked with selections from both established vineyards and emerging winemakers from underrepresented regions. The reservation system was completely overhauled. Instead of catering to a select group of regulars, it would ensure fair access while maintaining some flexibility for walk-ins. Special occasions would be celebrated regardless of the guest's status or spending power. One evening, as sunset painted the newly installed windows in golden hues, Alexandra gathered her entire team, from dishwashers to sommeliers, prep cooks to managers. They stood in the nearly completed dining room, surrounded by the physical manifestation of their shared vision. "Look around," she said, her voice carrying in the pristine space. "What you see isn't just a renovated restaurant. It's a promise to every guest who will walk through those doors, and to each of you who make this place come alive. It's a promise that excellence and inclusivity can coexist, that tradition and innovation can dance together, that fine dining can be both elevated and welcoming." She paused, looking at each face in the room. "In 2 weeks, we'll open these doors. We'll face challenges. We'll make mistakes. But we'll face them together, and we'll learn from them together. This isn't just about serving food, it's about serving hope, one plate at a time." The staff erupted in applause, their excitement palpable. As Alexandra watched them share hugs and excited conversations about the upcoming opening, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The physical renovation was nearly complete, but the real transformation, the one in people's hearts and minds, was just beginning. Opening night arrived with an electric energy in the air. Alexandra arrived at dawn, wanting to oversee every detail of this momentous day. The morning light streamed through the new glass panels, dancing across the restored ceiling medallions and illuminating the contemporary art pieces that now adorned the walls. In the kitchen, Chef Wang was leading his team through final preparations. The walk-in coolers were stocked with fresh ingredients from local suppliers, including several urban farms Alexandra had partnered with to ensure sustainable, community-supported sourcing. "Everyone remember to breathe," Wang called out to his staff, his usual quiet demeanor replaced with controlled excitement. "We've practiced everything. We know these dishes. Tonight, we cook with love." The front-of-house staff arrived early for final training sessions. Lisa, now promoted to guest relations manager, led them through scenarios they might encounter. "Remember," she emphasized, "every guest is a VIP guest. We're not just serving food, we're creating experiences." At 4 p.m., Alexandra gathered everyone for a final meeting before the doors would open. The staff stood in their new uniforms, designed for both elegance and comfort, their faces showing a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. 2 months ago, Alexandra began, I stood in this room and promised change. Look around you now. Look at what we've built together. She gestured to the transformed space, the diverse faces before her. Tonight isn't just about serving perfect dishes or providing flawless service. It's about showing the world that excellence has no prerequisites, not race, not class, not tradition. She walked through the dining room, making eye contact with each team member. Some of our guests tonight were once turned away from these very doors. Others have never dared to try fine dining, feeling it wasn't for people like them. Tonight, we show them, and the world, what true hospitality looks like. At 5:30 p.m., the first guests began to arrive. Mrs. Thompson, the woman who had been turned away in 1963, was given the honor of being the first guest. As she walked through the door, the entire staff lined up to welcome her with genuine warmth. It's so different, Mrs. Thompson whispered, tears in her eyes as Lisa guided her to her table, one of the best in the house. So beautiful. The dining room quickly filled with a diverse mix of guests. Alexandra had carefully curated the opening night reservation list to include people from all walks of life, local community leaders, food critics, social media influencers, and regular people who had shared their stories of past discrimination. In the kitchen, Wang orchestrated his team like a conductor leading a symphony. Each dish that left the kitchen was a masterpiece of fusion and technique. The traditional French onion soup now featured a delicate touch of lemongrass and kaffir lime. The duck confit was served with a reduction sauce that incorporated Taiwanese red cooking wine and 5-spice. Table 12 says this is the best meal they've ever had, Lisa reported, beaming as she ducked into the kitchen. And Table 7 wants to know if Chef Wong will come out and talk about the spices in the bouillabaisse. The evening flowed smoothly, despite the inevitable small hiccups that come with any restaurant opening. What impressed Alexandra most was how her staff handled each situation, with grace, creativity, and genuine care for the guest's experience. A minor crisis arose when a guest mentioned a gluten allergy that hadn't been noted in the reservation. Without missing a beat, the kitchen team adapted the tasting menu, creating equally spectacular gluten-free versions of each course. "This is what inclusion looks like in action," Alexandra murmured to her assistant. "It's not just about who we welcome, it's about how we make them feel welcome." As the evening progressed, social media began buzzing with photos and reviews. Food critics were posting real-time reactions, praising not just the innovative cuisine but the whole experience. "La Maison d'Or hasn't just been renovated," one prominent reviewer tweeted, "it's been revolutionized. This is the future of fine dining." Around 9 p.m., Alexandra noticed a familiar face at the bar, Pierre Dubois, the former owner. He sat quietly, observing the transformed space with an unreadable expression. She approached him, curious about what had brought him here. "I had to see it for myself," he said before she could speak. "I expected." He paused, searching for words. "I expected you would destroy everything. Instead, you've created something extraordinary." Alexandra sat beside him. "We didn't destroy anything, Pierre. We evolved. That's what living things do." As the last desserts were being served, a spontaneous moment captured the spirit of the evening. A young girl celebrating her quinceañera with her family asked if she could take a photo with the staff. Soon, guests from other tables joined in, and the dining room became a joyous mixture of laughter, stories, and shared excitement. Chef Wong emerged from the kitchen to a round of applause. His innovative menu had proved that tradition and innovation could coexist beautifully. Even more importantly, his leadership had shown that a kitchen could be both excellent and nurturing. "Tomorrow's reservations have doubled," Lisa reported, checking the online system. "And the waiting list is growing by the minute." As the last guests departed, leaving behind empty plates and glowing reviews, Alexandra gathered her tired but happy staff once again. "Tonight, we did more than serve meals," she said, her voice full of emotion. "We served justice. We served healing. We served hope." She raised a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings, to breaking barriers, and to proving that when we open our doors to everyone, we all rise higher." The staff raised their glasses in response, their faces glowing with pride and accomplishment. In the kitchen, the cleaning crew was already at work, preparing for another day. The art on the walls seemed to come alive in the dimmed evening light, telling stories of diversity, creativity, and change. Outside, the new sign gleamed softly in the night, "La Maison d'Or, where tradition meets tomorrow." The protesters who had picketed weeks ago were long gone, replaced by eager diners already trying to secure reservations for future nights. Alexandra took one last walk through the quiet dining room before heading home. She stopped at the front window, remembering that first night when she'd been turned away. The reflection that looked back at her now showed not just her own success, but the promise of change for an entire industry. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to prove that excellence and inclusivity could go hand in hand. But tonight, in the peaceful aftermath of a successful opening, Alexandra allowed herself to simply feel grateful for how far they'd come, and excited for where they were headed. 1 month after the grand reopening, Alexandra sat in her office reviewing a stack of press clippings. La Maison d'Or had become the most talked-about restaurant in New York, but not just for its innovative cuisine. The story of its transformation had sparked a larger conversation about inclusion in the fine dining world. The New York Times wants to do a full feature, her PR director announced during their morning meeting. Not just about the food, they're interested in the whole revolution you've started. Several other restaurants have reached out, wanting to know more about our hiring practices and community engagement programs. Alexandra smiled, remembering a conversation she'd had with Lisa just yesterday. Their former dishwasher-turned-manager had created a mentorship program, pairing experienced staff with newcomers to the industry. The program was already showing promising results, with 3 participants being promoted to more senior positions. Dr. Chen, her assistant, poked her head in. Chef Wong needs you in the kitchen. There's something you should see. In the kitchen, Alexandra found Wong surrounded by a group of culinary students from a local community college. The restaurant had started a scholarship program, offering internships and training to promising students who might otherwise never have access to fine dining experience. Show her, Wong encouraged one of the students, a young woman wearing a crisp white chef's coat with obvious pride. The student nervously presented a dish, a classic French tartare, but with subtle Indonesian influences that paid homage to her grandmother's recipes. Chef Wong helped me refine it, but he said I should keep the flavors authentic to my heritage. Alexandra tasted the dish, her eyes widening at the perfect balance of flavors. This needs to go on the menu, she declared. With your name on it. The student's face lit up with joy and disbelief. Later that afternoon, Alexandra hosted a meeting that would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. 5 other high-end restaurant owners from across the city had requested her guidance on implementing similar changes in their establishments. The resistance to change in this industry runs deep, one owner admitted. But your success is impossible to ignore. Our regulars are actually asking why we haven't diversified our menu and staff. As Alexandra shared her experiences and strategies, she noticed Pierre Dubois's nephew among the group. The young man had initially been one of their loudest critics, but now he sat taking detailed notes, occasionally nodding in agreement. The most important thing to remember, Alexandra explained, is that this isn't about following a trend. It's about correcting a historical wrong while making our industry stronger and richer in every sense. The meeting was interrupted by excited voices from the dining room. A group of regular guests had brought their elderly grandmother to the restaurant for her 90th birthday. The woman had worked as a cook for wealthy families in the 1960s but had never been allowed to dine in the establishments where she'd learned her craft. Chef Wong prepared a special tasting menu incorporating elements from her southern cooking background, creating a unique fusion of French, Asian, and soul food influences. When the dishes were presented, the woman wept with joy, telling stories about her years in professional kitchens. This is why we do what we do, Alexandra told her staff during their evening briefing. Every guest's story becomes part of our story. The restaurant's impact continued to grow in unexpected ways. A famous food critic, known for his harsh reviews and traditional tastes, wrote a surprising piece titled, "How I Learned to Love Change." He described how his initial skepticism about Le Maison d'Or's transformation had given way to genuine admiration. What Chen and her team have created, he wrote, is not the death of fine dining as some feared, but its rebirth. They have proven that excellence can be inclusive, that tradition can evolve without being destroyed. The article went viral, prompting discussions across the culinary world. Cooking schools began reaching out, wanting to learn more about incorporating diversity and inclusion into their curricula. Alexandra found herself being invited to speak at industry conferences, sharing her vision for a more inclusive future in fine dining. One evening, as she walked through the dining room, Alexandra overheard a conversation that made her pause. A young black chef was telling his date about how seeing Le Maison d'Or's transformation had given him the courage to pursue his own dreams of opening a fine dining establishment. If they can change centuries of tradition here, he said, maybe there's hope for all of us who've been told we don't belong in this world. The restaurant's success had also begun to influence the neighborhood. Other businesses started reaching out to Alexandra for advice on becoming more inclusive. A nearby art gallery had partnered with them to showcase works by emerging artists from underrepresented communities, creating a cultural corridor that was drawing visitors from across the city. Even the staff's personal lives were being transformed. Lisa had started a support group for industry professionals who had faced discrimination, creating a safe space for sharing experiences and strategies for change. The group had grown from 5 members to over 50 in just a few weeks. 1 year after the notorious night when Alexandra had been turned away, she organized a special event. The restaurant hosted a dinner celebrating barrier breakers, individuals who had fought against discrimination in various industries. The guest list included civil rights activists, business leaders, and ordinary people who had shown extraordinary courage in fighting for inclusion. During the dinner, Alexandra stood to make a toast. Looking around the room, she saw the physical manifestation of her vision, people from all backgrounds sharing meals, stories, and dreams. The restored ceiling medallions sparkled above them, a reminder that preserving history didn't mean being trapped by it. A year ago, this room was a symbol of exclusion, she began. Today, it's a testament to what's possible when we dare to imagine something better. We're not just serving meals here, we're serving change, one plate at a time. The evening ended with an impromptu cooking demonstration in the kitchen, where Chef Wong and his diverse team showed guests how they created their innovative dishes. The kitchen, once a rigid hierarchy, had become a collaborative space where everyone's input was valued. As the last guests departed, Alexandra received an unexpected message. A major international culinary organization wanted to create a new award category inspired by Le Maison d'Or's example, recognizing restaurants that excelled not just in food and service, but in creating genuine inclusion and opportunity. They want you to help design the criteria, her assistant explained. They're calling it the Future of Fine Dining Award. Alexandra looked around at her transformed restaurant, at the happy staff, the diverse guests, the walls that now told stories of change and hope. What had started as a response to discrimination had become a movement, inspiring others to reimagine what was possible in their own spheres. The future of fine dining, she mused, is already here. We just had to open the door and let it in. 18 months after the transformation of Le Maison d'Or, Alexandra found herself standing on a stage in Chicago, addressing a national conference of restaurant owners and culinary professionals. The crowd was 3 times larger than expected, with people standing along the walls just to hear her speak. Change isn't just about updating your menu or renovating your space, she told the attentive audience. It's about reimagining what's possible in our industry. As she spoke, slides showed the impressive statistics from Le Maison d'Or's success, record profits, unprecedented staff retention rates, and a waiting list that had grown to 3 months. But with success came new challenges. Back in New York, Chef Wong was dealing with an unexpected problem. Their innovative approach had attracted so much attention that other restaurants were trying to poach their staff, particularly their diverse young talents. We can't blame them for trying, Wong told Alexandra during their video call after her speech. Our people are proving that diversity drives innovation. But we need to find a way to grow without losing our soul. Alexandra had anticipated this challenge. During her return flight to New York, she drafted plans for what she called the Heritage Innovation Program. The idea was to help their staff open their own restaurants, with Le Maison d'Or providing mentorship, initial investment, and operational support. Instead of fighting to keep everyone, we'll help them spread their wings, she explained to her management team the next morning. We'll create a network of restaurants, each unique but united by our values. Lisa, who had recently been promoted to Director of Operations, immediately saw the potential. Like a culinary version of paying it forward, she said, already making notes. We could create a support system for new restaurant owners who might otherwise struggle to get funding or recognition. The program launched with their first success story. Their former sous chef was opening a fine dining establishment in Brooklyn that combined French techniques with his Puerto Rican heritage. Alexandra made sure he had everything he needed to succeed, from business advice to introductions to reliable suppliers. But not every challenge had such a clear solution. One morning, Alexandra arrived at the restaurant to find a film crew from a major streaming service setting up equipment. They wanted to do a documentary about La Maison d'Or's transformation. Think of the impact, the producer urged. Your story could inspire change across the country. Alexandra was torn. While she believed in the power of sharing their story, she worried about the pressure it would put on her staff. After gathering everyone for a discussion, they agreed to participate on one condition: the documentary would focus on the collective effort, not just on Alexandra or any single individual. The filming process revealed unexpected stories. They discovered that their head sommelier had been quietly mentoring young women interested in wine careers, a field traditionally dominated by men. The pastry chef had started a weekend program teaching advanced techniques to home bakers from underserved communities. This is what real change looks like, Alexandra told the documentary team. It's not just one big gesture, but thousands of small actions that create a ripple effect. The restaurant's influence continued to grow in surprising ways. A group of investors approached Alexandra about creating a fund specifically designed to support diverse entrepreneurs in the culinary industry. They wanted to use La Maison d'Or's success as a model for sustainable, inclusive growth. We're not interested in just making money, the lead investor explained. We want to change the face of fine dining across America. Alexandra agreed to advise the fund on one condition: that they prioritize projects that would maintain authentic connections to their communities. She had seen too many well-meaning initiatives fail because they lost touch with the people they were meant to serve. The pressure of national attention brought unexpected stress to the team. One evening, Alexandra found Chef Wang sitting alone in the kitchen long after service had ended. The usually composed chef looked troubled. "I'm worried we're becoming too big, too fast," he confessed. "Every dish we serve, every person we hire, people are watching, waiting for us to fail." Alexandra pulled up a chair. "Remember when you first showed me your fusion menu? Everyone said it wouldn't work. But you knew something they didn't, that authenticity and excellence are universal languages." Their conversation was interrupted by the night cleaning crew arriving for their shift. Alexandra had insisted on making these traditionally invisible workers full members of the restaurant family. They had healthcare benefits, profit sharing, and were included in all staff events. "Good evening, Dr. Chen," Chef Wang, the crew supervisor, called out. "We saw you on the morning news today. My daughter said she wants to be a chef now, says if you two can change things, so can she." Wang's expression softened. "Maybe that's why we need to keep growing," he said quietly. "It's not just about us anymore." The next day, Alexandra called an all-staff meeting. The restaurant was growing faster than anyone had anticipated, and she wanted to ensure they stayed true to their mission. As her team gathered in the dining room, she saw the same mix of excitement and anxiety on many faces. "I know change can be scary," she began. "Especially when you're the ones people look to as an example. But look around this room. Every one of you is here because you dared to believe in something bigger than yourself." She went on to outline their next steps: expanding their training programs, launching a scholarship foundation, and creating a support network for other restaurants wanting to follow their lead. But she also emphasized the importance of maintaining their standards and values. "We're not just running a restaurant," she reminded them. "We're nurturing a movement. Every person who walks through those doors should feel the same warmth, the same welcome, the same excellence we've always provided." As if to underscore her words, that evening brought a surprise visit from a legendary French chef, known for his strict adherence to traditional cuisine. He had been openly skeptical of La Maison d'Or's changes, but after dining incognito, he requested to meet the team. "You have not destroyed tradition," he declared, speaking to the entire staff. "You have proven that tradition is strong enough to embrace change, to grow, to become richer. This is not the end of fine dining, it is a renaissance. Later that night, as Alexandra walked through the quiet restaurant, she reflected on how far they'd come. The walls that had once symbolized exclusion now showcased a rotating gallery of diverse artists. The kitchen that had once enforced rigid hierarchies now hummed with collaborative energy. The dining room that had once turned people away now welcomed everyone who appreciated excellence. But she knew their work was far from over. As La Maison d'Or's influence grew, so did their responsibility to get it right, to prove that their success wasn't a fluke but a blueprint for the future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to show that fine dining could be both excellent and inclusive. "We're writing a new chapter in culinary history," she had told the documentary crew. "But the most important stories are the ones that happen every night, one table, one plate, one moment at a time." 2 years after that fateful night when Alexandra Chen was turned away from La Maison d'Or, she stood in the same spot where it all began. The restaurant had just received its third Michelin star, the first time in history that a restaurant had earned this honor while explicitly championing diversity and inclusion. "This isn't just our star," Alexandra told her assembled team, the prestigious award gleaming in her hands. "This belongs to every person who dared to dream of a more inclusive future for fine dining." The celebration that evening was unlike any other in the culinary world. Instead of an exclusive gala, they hosted a community feast that brought together people from all walks of life. Street food vendors whose children now worked in their kitchen served alongside Michelin-starred chefs. Former dishwashers who had risen to management positions shared stories with culinary students just starting their journeys. Chef Wang, who had recently been named Chef of the Year by multiple publications, worked the room with quiet pride. His innovative fusion menu had not only changed perceptions about fine dining but had inspired a whole new generation of chefs to embrace their cultural heritage. "Remember when they said we were ruining French cuisine?" he joked with Alexandra as they watched a young chef demonstrate a technique that blended classical French methods with Thai influences. Now they're calling it the future of gastronomy. The Heritage Innovation Program had exceeded all expectations. In just 2 years, it had helped launch 15 new restaurants across the country, each one a unique expression of its chef's cultural background and creative vision. More importantly, these restaurants were thriving, proving that excellence and inclusivity were a winning combination. Lisa, now a recognized industry leader in her own right, had created a comprehensive training program that was being adopted by culinary schools nationwide. "We're not just changing who gets to cook," she explained to a group of educators. "We're changing how people think about food, service, and hospitality." The documentary about La Maison d'Or's transformation had won several awards and, more importantly, had sparked similar movements in other industries. Alexandra regularly received calls from leaders in fashion, art, and entertainment, all wanting to learn how to create meaningful change in their fields. During the celebration, Mrs. Thompson, the woman who had been turned away in 1963, returned with her entire family. Her granddaughter had just been accepted into a prestigious culinary school, inspired by the changes she'd witnessed at La Maison d'Or. "I never thought I'd see this day," Mrs. Thompson said, tears in her eyes as she watched her granddaughter chatting animatedly with Chef Wang about fusion cuisine. "You didn't just change a restaurant, you changed what's possible." The evening's menu told its own story of transformation. Each dish represented a milestone in their journey: the innovative coco vin that had first proved fusion could honor tradition, the Indonesian-inspired tartare created by their first scholarship student, and new creations that pushed the boundaries even further. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Pierre Dubois returned, this time with an unexpected request. The former owner had spent the past 2 years reflecting on his role in perpetuating exclusion in the industry. "I want to make amends," he told Alexandra, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've created a foundation to support young chefs from underrepresented backgrounds. Would you help me do it right?" Alexandra's response was to introduce him to their latest group of culinary apprentices, talented young people who might never have found their way into fine dining under the old system. As Pierre shared his experiences with them, she saw the power of transformation working in both directions. The restaurant's influence had spread far beyond New York. Their success had sparked a global conversation about inclusion in the culinary world. Restaurants from Paris to Tokyo were reimagining their approach to fine dining, proving that excellence could wear many faces and speak many languages. But we have to be vigilant, Alexandra reminded her team during a quiet moment. Change isn't a destination, it's a constant journey. We have to keep pushing forward, keep opening doors, keep imagining what's possible. The evidence of their impact was everywhere. Their staff turnover rate was the lowest in the industry. Their mentorship program had a waiting list hundreds of names long. Their sustainable sourcing practices had created new opportunities for diverse suppliers and farmers. As the evening wound down, Alexandra gathered everyone for one final toast. The room was filled with people who represented every aspect of their journey, from the original staff who had dared to believe in change, to the new generation they were nurturing. 2 years ago, we set out to prove that fine dining could be both excellent and inclusive, she began. Today, we've shown that it must be both to truly be excellent. But our work isn't finished. Every night, when we open these doors, we're not just serving meals, we're serving hope, possibility, and the promise that talent and passion know no boundaries. She raised her glass, looking around at the faces that had become family. To the next chapter of our revolution. To all those who will walk through these doors tomorrow, next year, and in generations to come. To the power of food to bring people together, break down barriers, and create change that lasts. The applause that followed was more than just celebration, it was a promise to continue the work they'd started. As guests began to depart, each carrying their own piece of the evening's magic, Alexandra took a moment to walk through the restaurant one last time. The space had evolved yet again, now featuring an educational wing where they hosted cooking classes for community members, a research kitchen dedicated to culinary innovation, and a small museum documenting their journey and the broader history of diversity in the culinary arts. In the kitchen, she found Chef Wong teaching a late-night master class to a group of aspiring chefs. In the herb garden on the roof, Lisa was discussing plans for their next community outreach program. Every corner of the restaurant hummed with purpose and possibility. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the dark sky. The new sign still read, La Maison d'Or, where tradition meets tomorrow, but now those words carried the weight of proven truth rather than just promise. Alexandra thought about that night 2 years ago when she'd stood on this same sidewalk, facing discrimination with determination rather than defeat. She couldn't have known then that one moment of injustice would spark a movement that would transform an industry. As she prepared to leave, a young woman approached her, one of their newest staff members. "Dr. Chen? I just wanted to say, seeing what you've built here, what you've proved is possible, it makes me believe I can do anything." Alexandra smiled, remembering all the doors that had been closed to her throughout her career, and all the doors they'd managed to open since that fateful night. "You can do anything," she replied. "Just remember to hold the door open for those coming after you." The young woman nodded, understanding the weight of the legacy she was now part of. As Alexandra finally headed home, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had created more than a successful restaurant. They had created a blueprint for change, a proof that excellence and inclusivity could not just coexist but elevate each other. The revolution they'd started would continue, one plate, one person, one possibility at a time.